Hey guys, it's Mountain Walk, and today we got a little freaking sweet thing for you, and we got some mono black control. That's right. This is the second part of the mono black control thing I did about almost a year ago or something, right after or around the release of Modern Horizons 2, of course, with the reprinting of Cabal Coffers. Oh boy, and some choice prints in that set. There's all sorts of crazy stuff going on. So I was like, man, this looks like this could actually be a deck. And so I made it. Well, sort of. And this deck has been picking up quite a bit of steam, played by the one and only Aspiringspike. He's done some pretty incredible stuff with his stream, and actually one of the more he's not only is he I think Aspiringspike is not only one of the more interesting streamers. Like I think he has pretty good content, like entertaining, or at least entertaining enough, right? But I think he has really good takes, and I think he really has a very good understanding of like the game in general, and how things actually work. So definitely kudos to him for really taking this archetype to the next level. Anyways, let's get on with it. All right. So I must have watched like 10 hours or something of these mono black control sort of streams that he did for modern, and of course he's been changing stuff up here and there and whatnot. And yeah, I think he's done a really good job with it. I think he's more or less like some of the stuff that I had. Like oddly enough, we had a lot of the same sort of choices. Like again, more or less the same amount of like discard and fatal pushes and Lilianas and like two damnations, six fetches, six swamps, I believe, like 24, 25 lands. So like a bunch of stuff were like all in the same place, right? Um, there was a couple things I didn't get. One of which we'll get to the rest later, but one of which of course would be Blood Chief's Thirst. Yeah, this card is very sweet, very sweet. This is very good against Ren and Six, so you can answer Ren and Six on curve. And yeah, that's on curve. Well, whatever. It doesn't matter. Anyways, you can deal with Ren and Six very easily without having to attack it or anything like that, which is really nice because Ren basically hard counters Liliana, and that's certainly not a place you really want to be, especially because those Ren decks are so can be kind of creature heavy, have a ton of interaction and things to kill your Lily anyway, so certainly not a good thing. But Blood Cheese Thirst, so this is a great, another super cheap removal spell against, well, prowess creatures, burn creatures, all sorts of small creatures, small planeswalkers or whatever, and you can kick it and kill everything from, Ugin to Big Teferi to any creature or whatever. So that's really good. And this was maybe it's not the biggest miss of all time because I played a little bit more discard instead of like the extra one mana removal spells. But I think this is definitely a pretty important, at least if because the interaction, of course, between Liliana and Ren and Six, that sort of fight, you really want to win that one because Liliana is like one of your strongest cards, and the deck top decks so well that really getting your opponent's hellbent is very good. So, anyways, but I got a lot of stuff right. I got stuff wrong, pretty wrong, but some of them I didn't even have the choice of being right or wrong on because they weren't even printed, of course, until say the new Kamigawa set. Again, like Takanuma, of course, that we were just looking at on the opening, as well as stuff like Invoke Despair and whatnot. So yeah, pretty good, not too bad actually. There's a really big miss. I wasn't sure how good that kind of thing would be, but there's a really big miss we'll talk about. And most of the matchups, and as well as the deck itself, played out basically the same way, I'd imagine. You really want all the super cheap interaction to basically deal with anything. You can't be dirtling around forever, right? We don't have the nut draw of like turn 3 Tron. You know, we are a little bit slower than that, but we do scale way better with multiple coffers and Urborg, of course. So what we really need to do is, again, use all the super cheap removal and discard and so on to uh, buy us turns, right? To basically time walk our opponent because our end game is just going to be so much better than theirs, like unbelievable. Like when you're producing like 3 or 4 times the amount of mana, or even more than your opponent can have, like even in the late game. I mean, you know, it's really hard to lose at that point. So that's really sweet. And of course, the lands are just so much harder to interact with, which is really what drew me to the deck in the first place, because coffers and Urborg, unless your opponent's making a lot of concessions to certain things, uh, they're very difficult to interact with, right? So, I mean, there are even stuff like, you know, Field of Ruin or whatever, Cleansing Wildfire, really aren't that great because these kind of things still get you basic lands out of your deck and don't really, it's just a tempo loss for your opponent, so it's not that great. And most hands, you're going to be able to just play your spells as normal. So that's not that great of a thing for your opponent. So pretty strong. It's a lot. It's very similar in some respects to say like Blood Moon against Tron. Like if they have basic forest or two or whatever, they can still like cast some threats or whatever. But with us, it's even more so than that. And in fact, we can actually answer enchantments main deck pretty easily. So if we have we're dealing with Spreading Seas or Blood Moon itself or whatnot, we can deal with those as well. But anyway, so the deck mostly, more or less, has performed, at least from what I've seen, as much as about the same as I had imagined it, right? I mean, the deck can only really operate one way or whatever for the most part, you know, so it's not like this is some sort of genius level intuition, but yeah. Anyways, but it is has been tuned up quite a bit. A lot of really good stuff printed and really interesting innovation. So that's very cool. I also wasn't sure how the metagame would shake out, so I definitely had designed the original deck list to just sort of answer anything. That was something I was concerned about. I was like, I don't know what's going to be good, what's going to be bad. Like, there's so many cards, it's going to take a really long time for everything to sort of settle. And that did take quite a while, like 4 or 5 months, it seems like. But anyways, so yeah, but let's get to my deck list. We'll just go over that real quick. Yeah, so nothing too weird here. Um, this is again just a lot of the same stuff that you would see in Spike's deck list. The only thing not the only thing. Obviously, Mishra's Factory, not as important as I thought it was going to be, so that is replaced by a bunch of other utility lands. Grave Titan, again, not important, especially the way the deck is I guess double ramping. Is that the way we're going to be talking about it? Well, we'll get to that in a moment. But Sudden Edict was about the best thing I could think of as a way to answer something like Murktide, or just like creatures against decks with actual counterspell, actual factual counterspell. That was mostly replaced by something like Invoke Despair, which I think is just better, at least in some number. Whereas Sudden Edict is kind of like wonky and can be dead, whereas Invoke Despair can at least be like your opponent loses 6 life and you draw 3 cards. So that's fine. I had about 1, 2, 3 big, huge, fatty things. So Army of the Damned, Karn, and Gristlebrand. Obviously, Gristlebrand is like the greatest of all time. Karn was, again, mostly just a concession to all sorts of weird crap I didn't know or would or wouldn't pop up. But that's clearly not needed. Especially this was not the card to be playing. And then Army of the Damned, I don't think Spike has tested this. I don't think it's better than the way that Archon and or Gristlebrand play out. So this should just be Archon. I mean, like, there are certain niche situations where this could be good, like against a bunch of planeswalkers or something. or your opponent is swarming you or whatever. But anyways, so yeah, let's get to Spike's deck. All right, same thing, of course, the Profane Tutor Expedition map, obviously, Liliana the Veil, Thoughtseize, Inquisition, Push, all this good stuff. You know, he eventually ended up playing a Gristlebrand and an Archon instead of like two Archons. Obviously, Gristlebrand is busted, broken, B words. Yeah, so Gristlebrand, pretty sweet. A lot of this is, again, the same sort of thing. Obviously, you want a bunch of lands. You want to be hitting your land drops every turn, obviously. I think I like the four coffers to Urborg split. I think that works a little better. So that's something I would certainly switch. And of course, yeah, the one of Takenuma looked really good whenever he drew it, or tutored for it or whatnot, because it can recur planeswalkers or big stupid fatty things. So that's really sweet. And of course, Castle Walkwing. Again, he played two, I played two, because it seemed like this is the kind of thing that would be really powerful. Again, very little land disruption. So a deck that has a very low curve is able to actively empty its hand with these super cheap spells. Liliana Plussing, being able to also empty your hand, getting your hand empty with Castle is so good with Liliana, and just good in the late game, and is tutorable, and it just basically does everything, and is an untapped black source, and it makes you an espresso, a really good one too. So interesting stuff. Okay, so let's talk specifically about the most important difference. That would be me not playing Karn, which I am a big dum-dum for not doing that. So yeah, oops. I can't remember if I had considered it or not. Obviously, Karn is very powerful. Yeah, I wasn't sure how good this wouldn't be. I'm like, do I just play it, tutor up a thing, and then it just dies? So what, but obviously this card is very good. Oftentimes they'll tutor up two cards. Sometimes you'll even be able to, like, start plussing your opponent's stuff on, say, like liquid metal coating and all this kind of stuff. But there's a bunch of really important cards to get. Bolas' Citadel, which is good against slow, grindy decks where you're just like spamming cards. I mean, you're just going nuts. This thing is busted. This is so good. This is one of the better Karn targets. It's really powerful, even though I'll talk about replacing it in a few minutes. Wormcoil Engine. This thing is insane against like decks that play a lot of burn spells. Burn primarily, but also things like Prowess as well, or even anything like the Blue-Red Murktide deck. Being able to get 10 mana Karn into Wormcoil is just absolutely ridiculous. I mean, just absolutely ridiculous. And of course, another big one, get 7 mana, go Karn to bridge. It's a classic one. And it's so good against a ton of stuff. Really can slow the game down. A lot of decks just don't even really have a good answer, or only have a couple answers to bridge. So Karn is your tutor package. It is card advantage if you can minus it enough. And of course, it's even even this, the passive, it's artifact take. So some decks, like just slamming a Karn on turn 4, a lot of these artifact decks, if they're kind of dirtier or whatever, say something like Lantern Control or whatever, Karn just like crushes these decks. I mean, just unbelievable. So yeah, that also should not be underestimated. That's another good way to interact with artifacts in the main deck outside of something like discard. Okay, and now we have a couple of the other cards that are, well, the one of them is really important. The rest are slightly less important. I guess let's start off with the elephant in the room. Of course, that would be Golos. This card has, from what I've seen when Spike has been playing it on stream, very powerful. I mean, this thing can just get all sorts of stuff. I mean, main deck graveyard hate with the Pachuca Bog. being a card advantage engine with cascading cataracts, right, to get the 5 different colors of mana. Obviously to set up your Urborg Coffers engine just to get another Coffers to let you untap and go totally insane. To get a Blast Zone, right, if you need a way to destroy 1, 2, 3 mana kind of permanents, stuff like that. This thing does it all. I mean, obviously Castle Lockthwain is a pretty good one. So Golos does pretty much everything, and just being a 5 mana 3/5 is so good against just like a lot of the aggressive decks. Like just putting this big stupid like sort of fat thing in front of them is really quite good. And they'll take oftentimes multiple cards, 2 cards to kill it, as well as this can attack down Planeswalkers, which is really quite good. You know, this card is really good versus Teferi Time Raveler, as is every ETB creature. I mean, it's pretty silly, but yeah. So there you go. There you go. Golos, very, very powerful. This is another one that I missed. Another big miss for me. So I missed Karn and I missed Golos. Definitely huge, huge cards. And Golos maybe is a little more understandable, just a bit. But the play patterns are pretty awesome, and how the card actually works in the game is just much better than you think it would. The 3/5 is great at just blocking random crap, pressuring Planeswalkers, being another threat. Pretty sweet. And it's a, you know, tutors up land, obviously, is the main reason, and of course is a card advantage engine. It's just all this stuff put together for just 5 measly mana. Pretty sweet. So there you go. And of course, Invoke Despair. This is a nice card. This thing answers Saga, Urza's Saga, any random creature, answers Planeswalkers. So this is really great, and it's never dead, because if they don't have these cards, they lose 2 life and you draw a card. So if they have none of the things, they lose 6 life, you draw 3 cards. Which is a pretty nice sort of floor for a card, where like if you get like all of them, like you get a Planeswalker and an enchantment and a creature, I mean, you gotta be feeling pretty good about that. So yeah, very powerful card. And another one that has impressed me a whole bunch would be Cling to Dust. Just the random graveyard hate, shutting off Delirium. You know, obviously uses against graveyard decks or whatnot, just being a way to gain life against aggressive decks, namely Burn and Prowess and such, or Murktide or whatnot. Again, very good there. And of course, being able to be kind of like a card drawing engine too, albeit a very slow one. This card just does it all and is absolutely worth it as a one-of. Extremely impressed with this card. Very, very powerful, very cool. And of course, Dauthi Voidwalker. Now in my original build, I had things like Break the Ice and whatnot for like the decks where you can't just be loading up on tons of removal spells, right? Obviously, you know, for the control decks or stuff like Tron or whatever. Dauthi Voidwalker fills that role in Spike's deck list, because he has less spaces to work with in his sideboard because of Karn, although it looks like there might be a couple wiggle spots there. But Voidwalker, very good. It's a threat against control decks, so against the blue-white control decks, this thing shuts off like Snapcaster and all that kind of stuff. It's obviously pretty good against Murktide, and just has a lot of value all over the place. Not saying you would necessarily board it in versus those decks, but because your main deck's usually set up pretty well against them. But it does have a ton of value against the decks where your creature removal is less effective. So Voidwalker, very, very sweet. The card can't be blocked, right, because it has Shadow, so that's actually been pretty sweet, it looked like, on Spike's stream. And obviously, I mean, you have the third ability, the sacrifice one with the void counters. This is actually really sweet. I've seen him do a lot of stuff with it. And again, there's even really, really clever stuff where Spike talks about boarding in Dathi Voidwalker against the burn matchup, because if they ever get a helix off or whatever, uh, it gets a void counter or whatever, then you can use the helix and you can kill a thing and then gain 3 life, which is like just huge, huge, huge for you. So there's a lot of cool stuff going on here. Voidwalker is definitely a great way to, board out all the dead cards. Even if Voidwalker itself isn't the best card in the matchup, it still does some things, and obviously still very good with your discard, right? I remember seeing a game where he was like, okay, this hand is basically like turn 2 Voidwalker, turn 3 Thoughtseize. Even though he had a Thoughtseize still able to be played on the first turn, he was like, I'm going to hit a Primeval Titan from this Amulet Titan guy. That's my plan to win, or whatever, which is a pretty good heads up play. And of course, like, he did it, and it was amazing. So yeah. Getting, it's like we're playing, Commander or something. I remember in like black green sort of style of decks getting Urborg and coffers with Primeval Titan like many years ago, but in Commander. Anyways, so I thought that was really cool. So Voidwalker has a lot of uses. Great with your discard, great with your creature removal, good to just sort of swap out to have like an actual threat. It can, obviously pressure planeswalkers and this and that and the other, and just a great, sweet card. All right, and there's a couple things I just wanted to talk about specifically for the things that I was really concerned about. Again, I had 4 Break the Ice in my original list, and of course this was because Tron or Green Tron, and of course Eldrazi Tron, or any other sort of snow-based decks if those popped up. But those decks are, we'll say mostly the Tron style decks, although I guess if, the 4 color lists are running, oh gosh, I'd have to look. I'm not sure if they're running actual factual snowlands for Ice Fang Coatl, but anyways, Break the Ice is very, very good against the Tron decks. You might be able to fit 1 or 2 copies in. The card is just absolutely, like, it's a sinkhole, and then late game, it's one-sided Armageddon. So this is really, really good against the Tron style decks, because you just don't really have a ton of ways to interact with their lands. Break the Ice is about the only way to do it, like early game, as well as like rip it late game and just smash it onto the table and just like nuke them. So that's really something I think could be considered, like in your metagame, like especially if you have a Tron player or something, playing 1 or 2 Break the Ice in addition to all your other stuff that you have, like Voidwalkers and stuff. That could be a pretty good plan, in general, I don't know. It doesn't seem like there's a ton of Tron, but there is some amount of Tron in the metagame. And it looked like all the Tron games, it looks like Spike really, really struggled with, and that's sort of what I assumed would happen with a lot of this stuff, because you just can't really interact with the lands. Discard is only so effective, but they have a ton of cantrips to rip through their deck and find some big stupid thing and just take over the game. So yeah, a lot of your planeswalkers aren't that great, obviously, mostly being our good friend Liliana. Not that great. So Break the Ice was the hammer. I was looking for that matchup. It seems like this is really, because like this lets you interact on axis that you typically don't and or can't really for most decks in Modern, which is land destruction, like extremely cheap land destruction. Obviously, it's a little bit limited, right? Only snow lands or lands that can produce colorless, but you can easily pay the 6 for the overload, and that is just, game breaking. And speaking of things that work on axes that we typically aren't able to do in Modern, Sundering Titan. I commented on one of the videos. I'm like, hey, bro, you should think about Sundering Titan if this, if the mono black versus 4 color matchup is an issue. It looks like Bolas the Citadel is pretty good there. Sundering Titan, in some respects, it may be better. And again, it just depends. A Citadel looks really, really powerful in a lot of those matchups because, again, they don't pressure life total. But Sundering Titan lets you attack on an axis and immediately, like, it sets them back to the Stone Age. Being able to nuke, again, even the blue-white decks will often play, like, say, a Triome, right, to get more for their pending, or prismatic ending, I should say, of course, and they need to get 3 to their prismatic ending to answer a Liliana, right? So if you're going like turn 1 discard or whatever, turn 3 Liliana, and they'll probably just lose to that. So that's what they'll have to fetch a Triome to get an ending. But then again, this sets them up to just be blown out by Sundering Titan, and a lot of them are even playing Breeding Pool in addition. So you have blue, white, red, and green. And then because of the interaction with Urborg with Sundering Titan, that is 5 lands. That is 5 lands. This thing is not that hard to just be hard casting, right? After you tutor it up with Karn. This thing is just absolutely backbreaking. And it's an enormous, huge threat all on its own. So I think this is something that would be worth testing. Because this is because this works on a completely different axis of disruption, right, than you typically have access to, again, sort of like Break the Ice, but it's also, you can Karn for it, that being the big thing as well, so you only have to play the 1 in the sideboard. You just windmill slam this thing on the table, and just like, oh yeah, and the synergy with Urborg is so funny, because not only do you have to you don't have to destroy your own swamps, you get to destroy another land of theirs, because it's all lands. Another piece of very, very cool sort of tech. And obviously, yeah, this is insane versus the 4-color decks like Basics, Duels, Triomes, who gives a crap. You got Sundering Titan, baby, 7-10 split. Anyways, getting too excited, think about Sundering Titan, people. I'm just getting memories of like welding Sundering Titan in and out of play in Vintage, like 20 years ago, or I guess it'd be like 19 years ago or something at this point in 2003, but absolutely awesome. And I love this new art. All of the old art is very good and iconic too. I like the new art as well. So, yeah. Anyways, yeah. So what I realized is that, or at least what I thought, and then after watching Spike's stream and hearing his opinions, he thinks the deck is very real too. And I would certainly have to agree, just having all this super cheap 1-mana disruption that you can play on each turn while ripping lands, and then your deck, you just go from like, oh, turn 4, I produce 4 mana, just going to like, okay, turn 4, go to, or I should say, produce 5, right? If you have Coffers and Urborg, like, oh, here's just the Golos, put another Coffers into play, and then you're producing like 10 mana or something, or even more than that, 12 mana, right? Next turn, if you play a land. So yeah, you go up to 5 lands on turn 4, and then 6 lands when you play one on turn 6. So 2, 2. So that's 6 plus 6. So that's 12. So that's a lot of mana. That's a lot of mana. So you can go nuts. I mean, just absolutely nuts. Very, very cool. Spike wasn't the only one who did this. I think a guy called Trellin, I think was a streamer, or a guy that just plays on MTGO or something, but he was also doing it too. And then I think there was maybe 1 or 2 other people, a Japanese guy and whatnot. Again, not surprising, the Japanese innovating stuff in Magic. That's never happened for the last 20 years. But yeah. So Trellin did it. A couple other people did it. Of course, look, I was the guy that just kind of put out the first video. I know they should have given me credit, but I'm very humble. I will say that's okay, apology accepted. So no big deal. Anyways, yeah, so all the super cheap removal and the discard and everything, and especially Bloodchief's Thirst gives you extra game against Planeswalkers. Archon, of course, I think is the 1/1 split of Archon and Gristlebrand is very good. Archon just giving you the extra life, which is just just busted, just so busted against the aggressive decks. They sack a dude, discard a card, they they lose 3 life, and you're like, I draw a card and gain 3 life. I mean, this thing is insane, absolutely insane. I love it. Yeah, real sweet. Again, you can have sort of kind of wonky hands, but the deck is super consistent with the power of Profane Tutor and Expedition Map, which this is the heart of the deck. This is why it was even so good. I thought it was really clever coming up with that, because I'm like, wait, so this is, you get it on turn 4. I mean, you can get your Urborg and your coffers, and you can sack your map on turn, play your map on turn 1, and then Profane Tutor, and then sack the map on turn 3, and then throw out some discard. I mean, you just do it all, and so cheaply. And of course, I mean, because of all of these powerful different non-basic lands like Castle, Black Castle, and Blast Zone, and obviously Urborg coffers clearly, but Bojuka Bog, especially with Golos, being able to bog people main deck, that's so huge. Just having this sort of incident, well, it's not exactly incidental because it's played specifically to hate on graveyards, but having these cards that be able to deal with graveyards is just so powerful. So yeah, definitely looks like it feels pretty great. One of the harder matchups, of course, would be something like Dredge, and again, if you expect it in your metagame, or maybe on Magic Online during one of the challenges, it's like, oh, it looks like Dredge is going to be good or whatever. Playing more stuff like, Tormod's Crypt, maybe not such a bad idea. So keep that in mind. And the reason I like this deck is sort of the same reason why I like Goblins. Like, you can set up and do your thing. I mean, obviously, with Goblins, you have the Goblin Lackey openings where you're just like, play a Lackey, they like Island Ponder, and you're like, okay, here's Muxus, and then you're like, you just win. You just win because you're so skilled. Like the skill, your skill is just so skillful. You can't even help it. But in general, you're building up lands, you're playing a war chief, you're getting your vial out, you're doing this, doing that, porting them, you're trying to get to the late game, you're changing, you're 1-for-1ing them, or 2-for-1ing them, or you're blocking with your Mod War Marshal or whatever, and you're just doing these little bit of things, just trades here, there, 1-for-1, 1-for-1, to set up your really powerful late game. That would be Goblin Ringleader, and of course, sometimes Muxus too, right? For the Legacy Goblin lists. And that's sort of what we're doing here. Same thing, except very cheap interaction, 1 mana interaction, plus, playing, you got 24 lands, same thing as like the Goblin decks do. And you're just playing lands, interacting, do your thing, and you're fine. Just you actively want to trade resources with them. It doesn't really matter what you're trading. It's fine. You counter it, whatever. Who cares? Like, as long as you don't just like top deck lands for 10 turns or something. And even then, like if it's like a Castle Lockthwain or whatever, you're still in the game. And then like you get to turn 5 or 6 or something, and you're just like throwing haymaker after haymaker after haymaker that are like getting you many cards. Obviously something like Archon or Gristlebrand of all things. Yeah, I mean, these cards are not. These are not easily beatable cards. Like, how often do you lose with a Gristlebrand in play in a deck like this? I mean, I honestly can't remember a single game off the top of my head where Spike lost with like a Gristlebrand or an Archon in play, just because, I mean, like, cards are just busted. Like, you get the Gristlebrand when they have no pressure in play, draw a bunch of cards, rip their hand apart, and then just keep smacking them, drawing extra cards or whatever. Archon is a little bit better when they have a board presence, so you can, and of course, like, especially against the burn decks where it immediately gains you life is quite good too. So yeah, this thing is just awesome. It is so awesome and so fun. Yeah, really appreciative to all the work that these other people, that they put in. They put in a lot of work, and it's been really sweet, really fun watching this deck evolve a little bit. But yeah, the basics of just like cheap interaction, expedition map, Profane Tutor, plus like some random big fatties, And then some really powerful planeswalkers. Of course, yeah, missing Karn was a big one, and of course missing Golos too. Uh, big, big, big oopsies. Oops, I did an oopsie. Oopsie daisy. Oh man, I'm quite discheesed. I'm quite discheesed. But yeah, that's it. So this deck is really sweet. This deck is really fun. And it's actually, it kind of reminds me like a kind of like a zombie, right? Because when you're playing against this deck, it's like you're alive when this deck starts to eat you. So try and show a little bit more respect, kid. Anyways, so that's it. That's it for today, guys. Not much else to say. Go watch Spike's stream. I'll go ahead and link my original video in the comments or whatever, and it's all good. It's all sweet. So there you go. So thanks for stopping by, and have a great day.